So I've been thinking this week about doing this once a month on a continuing basis. So I think if I do that, I think it'll be here, although it's harder to rent this theater during the academic year. But if it isn't here, it'll be somewhere else. And because I'd like to continue doing this, I'm learning an awful lot from doing it. And once a month would really be good, because then I could really do the background work, and I could probably do that for a couple of years, because obviously this isn't going very quickly. But that's okay, you know. I mean, it shouldn't go any faster than it can go, and that's how it seems to me, anyways. So this has been a very steep learning curve for me with regards to these stories, because I didn't understand them very well. And I've got better at using the resources online to help me do my background investigation. I have a lot of books, and some of you may have noticed that online I posted a conversation I had with Jonathan Pageau and his brother Matthew. I hope it's Matthew. Names escape me so badly, but I believe that's right. He just finished a book on the Bible, and so I've been doing a lot of thinking and talking about these stories, trying to understand what they're about. And then there's all these commentaries. There's a great site, I think it's called Bible Hub, that has every single verse of the Bible is listed there, and then with each verse they've aggregated 10 commentaries from over the last 400 years. And so there's like a dense page on every line. And that's one of the things that's really interesting about this book too, is that it's aggregated so much commentary that it's much bigger than it looks. The book is much bigger than it looks. And so it's been very interesting to become familiar with those too. And the fact that this site is set up with all the commentaries split up by verses means you can rapidly compare the commentaries and get a sense of, you know, how people have interpreted this over, well, at least several hundred years, but of course much longer than that, because the people who wrote the commentaries were, of course, reading things that were older than that. So that's been very, very interesting. So last week we talked about a couple of things. We talked about how you might understand the idea of a divine encounter, and then we also paralleled that with the idea that God disappears in the Old Testament. He bows out as the stories progress, and that seems to be an emergent property of the sequencing of the stories, right? Because all the books were written by independent people, different people, and then they were aggregated by other people, and so the narrative continuity is some kind of emergent property that's a consequence of this interaction between people, readers and writers over centuries. And it's strange that, given that there are also multiple coherent narratives that unite it, you know, it's really not that easy to understand that, but it does at least seem to be the case. And the third thing we talked about was that as God bows out, so to speak, the individual personality seems of the characters that are involved, the human characters that are involved, seems to become more and more developed. And it isn't exactly clear what it means is that God steps away and man steps forward. That's what it means. But why it's arranged like that, or the say ultimate significance of that, is by no means clear. And so Abraham, who we're going to concentrate on today, is quite a well-developed character. And I would say there are multiple endings and beginnings in the biblical stories. The most important ending, I suppose, is the ending of the Garden of Paradise and the disenchantment of the world and the sending forth of Adam and Eve into history, right, into the future, into a mode of being that has a future as part of it, and that has history as part of it, and that has the necessity of sacrifice and toil as part of it. That's obviously crucial. And then that is replayed with the story of Noah, because everything is destroyed and then the world is created anew, and then sacrifices have to be made in order for the world to begin. And then you see the same thing happen again after the Noah story in the Tower of Babel, because history, as we really understand history, seems to start with Abraham, because the stories of Abraham sound like historical stories. And you know, scholars debate about the historical accuracy of the Bible, and I suppose there's no way of ever determining once and for all the degree to which you might regard the accounts as equivalent to modern empirical history. But this is a psychological interpretation of the biblical stories, not a historical interpretation. And it certainly does seem to be the case that from a psychological perspective, we enter something like the domain of the modern conceptualization, relatively modern conceptualization of history with Abraham.